If you look at the real startup stories, Apple, Google, and so on, none of these companies started with debt financing. Why is that? Well, actually, the the return relationship was not really good for banks. I'd like to talk about that a little further in this chapter. So, if you go back in the days of Adam Smith, he once said banks should expand their credit policies since the only additional effort is the administrative one. During his days, that might have been right. If you look at the bankers of today, their perspective is there are no profit sharing schemes for us if you're successful. Why should we invest in your business then? If you look at what banks are doing, they give money to customers, they get an interest rate. So think about the bankruptcy rate of companies, of tech companies. Let's say 50%. If you have a 50% bankruptcy risk in an industry, and if you give money to that industry, what is your risk premium of the interest? Actually, with every second credit you give, you have to earn the other credit. Means you have to have a 100% interest rate. Actually, no startup wants a 100% interest rate, and no bank can ask for a 100% interest rate. This is why actually this banking business is not made for that kind of risk-return relationship. If you as an equity investor have a 10% share in the business and the one business is going through the skies and you make 100 million and the other business is going bankrupt, you invested $1 million or you even invested 10, no worries because you end up with 90 million. And that's the difference between banks and equity capitalists. And in the banking business, giving a credit normally is being done in that scheme. As a client, you have a relationship manager. This is the guy, if you step into a bank, who says hello to you and talks to you. If you say, I'd like to obtain a credit from you, he puts together all the material, or you help him put together all the material, and he gives all those relevant documents to a credit analyst, actually a guy who doesn't know you. And this credit analyst is basically doing his decision based on 4 criteria. Financial conditions. In a startup, they are not really good. Account management, you might not have it because you just started. Market and competition might be good for you. Management competence, actually, there are better companies out there. Sure, those established companies, they have the capabilities. You don't. So if you look at their criteria and the question if you can meet the criteria, you probably end up with a company risk factor. This is what they do, which is somewhere over here. D plus or F plus or whatever. And banks want to serve AB customers. They don't want to serve those. And this is why technically banks don't like to serve startup entrepreneurs. Even if you can adjust the company risk factor by bringing in liabilities, your own house or something like this. If you borrow against your house and your company gets bankrupt, you lose your house, the bank gets it. But banks don't want to deal with houses, they want to deal with money, so even this they hate. And in general, so to say, it is difficult dealing with banks because the risk-return relationship you are offering to the bank is not feasible for banking businesses. And this is why startups generally do not fulfill the credit conditions of banks, and this is why startups normally don't obtain credits from banks. However, I'd like to add one thing. Why is it still very, very important for a startup CFO to have a good relationship with your local banker? Well, think about the bar. Think about you open a bar, you invest into the bar, you invest into the drinks, and you hope customers will come. So what you need for that is working capital. How do you calculate your working capital? Well, you think about the number of people who are coming and the amount of time you have to have bottles and juice and all sorts of things on stock in order to serve that number of people. So you need some working capital which you have calculated in your cash flow statement. Now, something very, very nice happens. More customers come. Or someone wants to do his birthday party in your bar because it's such a great bar. So you need to have more drinks on stock, which also means you have to have more working capital. How do you meet the demand of more working capital? Actually, ask your local bank. That's the only way you can do that. Because your local bank, if you have an online bank and ask them, I need a higher credit line, they sit anywhere in the world and they decide without looking at you. The local bank, maybe the banker knows you, and maybe he can say, okay, I am willing to expand your credit line because I love to see your bar being so successful. So having a good relationship to your local banker has advantages of the possibility of getting more funding if it's necessary, especially also when your company develops positively and with a short-term funding like the credit line of your bank account. And this is why, in general, banks do not serve startups with credits, with debt financing. The only exception is the credit line of your bank account. But it's worth having a local bank and a good relationship with your local banker, because in combination of those two, that really helps you sometimes to survive with your own business.